Hello friendos and randos, welcome back to another video. I do have Law over here, but I am actually today doing a video on one of the new OP05 leaders, which I'm really excited for, Blue Black Sakazuki. I think he is one of the best leaders that is coming out in the next set, and I think he has a very strong kit. Even without all of the new cards revealed yet, just with two of the new SRs, I think he is already one of a top tier contender for best deck in, well, maybe not in the format, but he's one of the best new decks for sure. So let's quickly go through the deck list that I have in mind, as well as some of the different options that we have available in order to make this deck even better. And I'll also talk a little bit about the new cards that are going to be released in OP05. Okay, first off, let's talk about the leader ability. Activate main once per turn. You may discard a card, and then after that you may draw a card. So discard a card and draw a card. One thing, of course, is that with colors like black and blue, there are a lot of top end no counter cards, so being able to filter those out of your hand is very, very great. And on top of that, being able to do this every turn without fail means that you can fill up your trash for card effects such as the new Lucci or any of the other black cards. If you're running a CP package, for example, you can throw CP cards in the trash in order to activate Kaku or Bruno. And if you're running things like maybe Black Luffy, although I wouldn't recommend it, you can fill up your trash in order to make sure he can use his effect in order to swing twice in a turn. So the second effect is one of the things that makes this card so great. When attacking, reduce an opponent character's cost by 1. And the best part about this is that it doesn't have a Dawn cost attached to it. So you can swing and then just reduce cost by 1. Even if you are, for example, your opponent is Whitebeard, you can't swing into his 6k leader, it doesn't matter, you can still reduce the cost by 1. It's very, very good. And I will explain to you why it's so good in a little bit. It does sound underwhelming at first, but once you see the different cards that I have included in the deck, I think you'll be able to understand. So let's start off with our group of blockers. So black and blue have a bunch of very good blockers available to them. I will be running several of them as well. So you can see here we have number 1, Sabo. Sabo is a fantastic card. His effect is, of course, on play, draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards, and all of your cards aren't able to be killed by effects until the end of your next turn. So this is really good for protecting your cards from things like Fire Fist, or from even the new Lucci, or Sabo. Anything that just removes things in general. Even 5 cost Marco can't hit your Bartolomeo blocker anymore, for example. So it's a very, very good card. On top of that, draw 2, discard 2. So if you, again, have a lot of no counter cards in hand, you can always filter those out. If you're trying to look for key top end cards, you can also use that as well. Next, for the blockers, we have 4 cost Borsalino. Borsalino, very good card as well. 4 cost blocker during your opponent's turn, plus 1k power, so he's a 6k blocker, as well as cannot be killed by effects. So no jet pistols, no ace Seaquakes, anything like that as well. So very good stat line as well. 4/6 for a blocker is very, very strong, and he even has 1k counter, so fantastic staple card. In terms of the number of blockers as well as the which blockers to use, I think it's actually pretty flexible. So this could also be Fukuro, it could also be the 1 cost law even. So there's a lot of very good options here. Okay, next blocker is 2 of the 3 cost Doflamingo. This is the blocker that allows you to look at the top 5 cards of your deck. So this is actually very, very good in this deck as well, because number 1, your leader ability, you have to trash before you can draw the new card. So for example, if you are trying to clear certain cards from the top, you have to know the right order. You can't draw and then discard the card that you drew if it was a bad card. So I like that. Another thing is that this deck has a very, very good perfect curve. So these cards help you really ensure that you get the perfect curve out as many games as possible. So I'll talk a little bit more about the perfect curve for this right at the end of the deck profile. But next, for the blockers, and the last of them is 4 of the 3 cost Bartolomeo. So this is both a 2k counter and a blocker. 3/3 stat line, does die to Marcos, but you also do have the Sabo now to protect him. And on top of that, he is a 2k counter, so he is really, really fantastic card. And now on that point, I will talk about the rest of the 2k counter cards. So next is Tsuru. Tsuru is a 1 cost, reduced cost by 2. Very, very good card in black in general, being able to reduce the cost of large things to be in the range of your 6 cost Sakazuki, your 10 cost Kuzan. 10 cost Kuzan plus this can make even Kobe KO a 10 cost card, for example. Very, very good. Combined with the leader ability, you're able to reduce something by 3 with just this one card. So very, very good card. Next is also more cost reduction and 2k counter is Tashigi. Tashigi is very good as well. She is another 3 Dawn play. Is good into Zoro. You can smack into his weenies and everything. Your leader is non-slash type, so that's good as well. And on top of that, she also does function as a blocker. People will want to clear her in order to, you know, make sure that you don't get a free reduction every turn as well. And if you put her down, for example, before your 10 cost Kuzan or another one of your removal options, you're able to clear a much bigger target. So with this on board, before your 10 cost Kuzan drops, you're able to clear a 8 cost total with your leader effect as well. So very, very good card as well. So that is the last of the 2k counters, and now I want to talk about a new card. So this is a proxy, but this is the new 4 cost SR Uti. So the new SR Uti's effect is if your leader is mixed colored, you may look at the top 3 cards of your deck, add 1 card to your hand, and then return the remaining 2 to either the top or the bottom of your deck in the order that you desire. And the interesting thing is that you don't actually have to show your opponent what card you draw off of this. So you can just add it to your hand and then say, okay, here, the rest I put at the bottom or I put at the top. Very, very good card. Again, aligned with the Doflamingo, it's a card that you use in order to make sure that you get your perfect curve. So you put this down, you can draw your Sakazuki for the next turn, or you can rig the Sakazuki to be there for the next turn. And then after that, make sure that you get either your 8 cost or your 10 cost for the following turn as well. So it's always good to be able to see the future a little bit, having that observation haki type effect. Being able to draw a card as well is very, very good for a 4 cost, and the body is also 5k and it also has counter, so it's really just such a good card. So right now I have it at 3 copies. I think 4 copies is also doable as well. It's just a very all-around fantastic card. So now that we have this done, I want to talk about the top end that I want to include in this deck. So firstly, we have the 10 cost Kuzan. 10 cost Kuzan is a, of course, very good staple for all black decks. 10 cost, 10k power, on play, KO a 0 cost character. During your turn, when this character is on the board, all of your opponent's cards have -5 to their cost. So combined with your leader effect, this card can actually KO a 6 cost character on play. So which is why I mentioned with Tashigi, also you can KO an 8 cost. If you have 2 Tashigis, you can KO a 10 cost, you know. Bunch of different interactions. Of course, black is a combo deck in its own as well. So this really enables the rest of your cards to do a lot of work. So you will find out what I mean by that very shortly. So next on the top end right now, tentatively I have the SR 10 cost Kaido from OP04. This is 10 cost 12k power. On play, return a 8 cost character and a 3 cost character to your to its owner's hands. So you can also use this on your own characters. So for example, if I want to return a Tsuru so I can reuse it, or I get the 2k counter back, that's very good. Or if I want to use Tashigi and then I rest it, reduce one of my opponent's characters cost, I can use this to bounce 10 cost as well as return the Tashigi to my hand. So currently I'm running this Kaido. I think the new SEC Kaido is pretty interesting. Draw 4. Draw 4 cards is very funny, of course. And of course it still has the same 10-12 body. But I am still a bit on the fence of it. I think it is a possible replacement, but this amount of tempo swing is really, really strong. If you have, for example, the 10 cost Kuzan on the board already, this can return a 10 cost Mum as well as an 8 cost Katakuri, for example. And that is a crazy amount of tempo to, you know, remove in one card. So the reason we have so many blockers, of course, is also because, you know, there's so many top end that we want to run. And with this deck and this leader, I don't feel bad running this many top end, because if I draw too many, I can always discard one every turn. And I'm also running Sabo, and later you'll see I'm also running Soge King. Okay, next is more new cards. So I have 3 of the new 4 cost Lucci. So this is a proxy as well, but I will show the card on the screen. Its effect is on play, return 3 cards from your trash to the bottom of your deck, and then after you do that, you may KO a 2 cost and a 1 cost character. With your leader effect alone, you can change that into a 3 cost and a 1 cost 3 cost and a 1 cost character, or 2 cost characters. So it's a very good card against decks like Zoro and Law that have a lot of weenies, and it's very, very potent if you have other cost reduction on the board, especially the 10 cost Kuzan. With this on the board, you can KO 2 7 costs, or you can KO a 8 cost and a 6 cost. That is crazy amount of removal for one card, and you don't have to discard for it. Wow, that is amazing value. So I only have 3 copies now. Of course, I think it's also something that you can go up to 4. I've tested this deck a few times with my friends, mostly against yellow, as well as I played a few games against yellow, and I played one game against queen and a few games against Nami. Nami is really tough for this deck. It is a little bit slow, but even yellow, which is normally a bad matchup for blue and black, this deck can do pretty well against. Okay, next I have a 1-off 4-cost Kuzan, just because I wanted a little bit more additional cost reduction and an additional play on the 4-don turn. This could very easily be another Lucci or another Uti in the 4-cost slot. I also kind of just wanted to include my AA, so that is why it's there as well. And it's very good for cost reduction in general. Draw a card is always good as well. This concept called Perfect Curve Blue in OP04. So on your 5-don turn, if you play a 5-cost character, they can use Sansen Sekai, return it to the bottom with 4-don. Then when you play a 6-cost character, they can return it to hand with Sogeking. Then if you play a 7-cost character, they can bottom deck it with the Mihawk. If you play an 8-cost character, they can return it to hand with Kaido. If you play a 10-cost character, they can return it to the bottom of your deck with Red Rock. So there are a few things that blue on its own cannot remove. So for example, if you're playing on Perfect Curve, there are a few times where blue cannot remove your card on curve. For example, if you don't have 3000 worlds and you play a 4-cost character on 4, currently there isn't a character that allows you to tempo up a 4-cost card. Or on the 8-don turn, if you play an 8-cost character, the Mihawk cannot bottom deck the 8-cost character. So these are 2 scenarios where blue currently falls flat, but Sakazuki solves that problem. So we're going to start off with that first one. Going first on the 5-don turn, your opponent going second plays a 4-cost character. You swing with your leader and then reduce that character's cost and return it to hand with Zeph, bouncing a 3-cost character to hand. So this is huge amount of tempo that you gain if your opponent just plays that 1 4-cost. You swing with leader, you return it to hand. Next turn, they play a 6-cost character. Now you have 2 options. Number 1, Sogeking. Sogeking, 7-cost, returns a 6-cost character to hand. Option 2, Sakazuki. 6-cost, 6-cost, KO a 5-cost character. So these 2 options allow you to remove that 6-cost threat right away. So imagine, 4-don turn you play a 4-cost, it gets returned to your hand by Zeph. 6-don turn you play a 6-cost, it gets KO'd or returned to hand by Sakazuki or Sogeking. And then after that, once your 6-cost has been removed by one of these cards, your next turn, you have 8-don, you think, okay, fine, let me play my 8-cost card. And then your leaders, and then it comes to your turn instead. The Sakazuki leader swings, reduces its cost by 1, and then bottom deck by the 9-cost Mihawk, which targets 7-cost characters, which is now 8-cost characters with your leader. So suddenly, the going first blue curve is really perfect. On your 5-don turn, you bounce your opponent's 4-cost card. On your 7-don turn, you bounce your opponent's or KO your opponent's 6-cost card. And on your 9-don turn, you bottom deck your opponent's 9-cost card. So this is a crazy amount of tempo that you get. And at the end of all of that, your board looks like this, and their board is empty. So it's crazy amounts of tempo that you get by being able to perfect curve out, which is why I was saying that Doflamingo as well as Uti are very good cards for this deck in order to ensure that you can get that tempo swing in the early pre-10-don stages of the game. And then after that, on the 10-don turn, you can also use your Kaido or your 10-cost Kuzan to remove board further. And when your 10-cost Kuzan is down, you get to do even more crazy tempo plays. 5-cost, bounce a 8-cost card. 7-cost, you can bounce anything in the game. If you play 3000 worlds in this deck, which I'm not playing right now, you can also do that. Your Mihawk can hit anything in the game as well with the Kuzan on the board. Your 4-cost Lucci can also hit huge amounts of targets if you have the 10-cost Kuzan on the board. So this deck is very, very strong. It has a very strong curve heading into the late game, and it has a very strong late game as well. And it has very good defensive capabilities because of the black 2k counters, as well as the number of blockers that you have. Here right now we have a total of 14. On top of that, you are huge on hand filtering because you have your leader effect, you have Sabo, and you have Sogeking. So you are very likely to find the pieces that you need in order to, snowball the game into a good position for yourself. Of course, the problem with black and blue is always getting rushed down by decks like Zoro, and that is why cards like this new 4-cost Lucci is going to be very, very huge for them in order to be able to get that tempo, as well as reduce the amount of aggro that you do take. So there are, of course, a few other cards that I think could make the cut, so I will be flashing them on screen here. I think all of these are very good options as well. They could make the cut. For example, the 3C ulti I think could make the cut. I personally don't like it that much because of the Dawn ×1, meaning that you do have to play off curve, and this deck's perfect curve is so disgusting. Plus there isn't really anything I would really want to cut here. The first on the chopping block for me would probably be Borsalino, if anything, and in that case it would also probably be for another blocker. Another option I guess is to reduce the number of top end, because again with the Sogekings and Sabos you are likely to draw into them, but I am currently quite liking the ratios here. There are a few other cards that are soon to be released in OP05. I am doing this video before the official set release, so of course there are a few new cards that may come out that you could consider adding in, but right now this is the deck list that I've been testing and I think it is very, very strong. Well, hello there, I'm back, and actually the cards just got fully released over the past couple of days, including a few new blue events. So I wanted to talk about two of them which I think are really good. First one is this, which is Hound Blaze. Activate main, give up to one of your leaders or characters plus 3k power for the turn for 2 Dawn, so it's essentially free. It actually gives you 1 Dawn extra worth of value, and then after that you also get to send one cost 2 or lower character to the bottom of its owner's deck. So this is a pretty good 2 Dawn play that we didn't have previously. On top of that, it's like it's a bit like a better Meteor Volcano because it hits 2 costs for 2 instead of 1 cost for 2, and it still gives additional effect with the plus 3000 power. So it's a really good card. It just straight up power creeps Meteor Volcano, and then the trigger is also pretty good. Return a cost 3 or lower character to the opponent's hand, so it's like 3000 walls as well. 3000 walls returns cost 3 to bottom of deck, this returns to hand, so still pretty good. So this event is really crazy. 8 costs, it is a waste of human life main event. Bottom deck, all cost 3 or lower characters, so including your own and your opponent's. And then after that, both players discard cards from their hand until they both have 5 cards each. So this is a crazy card to kind of balance the card hand size advantages that usually black and blue tend to suffer from. And it also just is a huge board wipe, so crazy potential here. The trigger is return all cost 2 or lower characters to the bottom of their owner's decks. So it's just a baby version of the main effect. But wow, this is a very crazy event. I don't know how many of these you would include in the deck, but it's a very interesting card for sure. Next up, I also wanted to talk a little bit about some of the new black characters that were released. There's a bunch of them that are possibly interesting that may synergize well. For example, Hot Couture Patchwork. This is a 1 cost event which is a main event, and then it reduces the cost of a character by 3, and after that one of your opponent's cost 0 characters can't be set as active during their next refresh phase. So it's kind of like a stun. It does feel a bit strange because it doesn't really synergize much with the rest of the deck, but I think we'll be able to see what some people cook up with this event. It is a Dressrosa and Tontota tribe card, so it's not searchable unless you're using Rebecca. And the trigger is draw 2 and then discard 1. The most interesting card I think that is actually possible to include here is the Black Vivi. So she's a 1 cost blocker, conditional blocker. So she's a blocker if you have 10 cards or more in your trash. With this deck, it's actually pretty reasonable to hit that line very quickly, and she has counter as well. So I think this is a really good card that you could definitely include in the Blue Black Sakazuki deck as well. And then I also wanted to talk a little bit about the Dragon Claw event. So basically this is like a slightly different version of Impact Wave. It doesn't have a trigger, but the effect is this: give your leader or character plus 4000 power, and then after that if you have 15 or more cards in your trash, you can KO 1 cost 4 or lower character. So it doesn't have a limit, so the character doesn't have to be active for this event to KO them. But the 15 card limit in the trash is actually pretty tough to reach for like Sakazuki compared to Rebecca, for example. And by that time, KOing a 4 cost won't be as impactful as well. So I don't think we have the space to include this, but it's definitely an interesting option to have as well. So I think Stainless is also interesting. He's kind of like Garp, the 5 cost starter deck Garp. His effect is activate main, you may discard a card to bottom deck a 2 cost character. And this is also pretty good in Sakazuki because on curve you can play him down and then bottom deck a 3 cost character, kind of like Zeph. But I think in this case I would rather just run the 4 cost Lucci instead. I feel like it would be a bit stronger. Plus this, because you need to KO for this card, it's slightly worse in my opinion. So that is one of the limitations for Stainless. Other than that, I don't think any of the newly released blue or black cards are that impressive for Sakazuki in particular, but there's definitely a lot of potential for other decks like Rebecca or maybe even Queen to improve with them. So I'm really looking forward to the OP05 meta. Once again, friendos and randos, thank you so much for coming to watch this video. I know that there's a lot of excitement around OP05, especially with the Gear 5 Luffy card, as well as the manga Luffy card, which I am fingers crossed really hoping to pull. But right now, I think in terms of the leaders, Blue Black Sakazuki is definitely the highlight for me. Once again, thank you guys for coming so much. Oh shit, pause. Once again, thank you guys so much for coming and watching my video. Make sure to drop a like as well as a subscription. Let me know what you are interested in playing for OP05, and peace out.